Mm-mm-mm-mm.
The most human trait.
Yeah, right. There are no human traits anymore. We're all animals. All right. Hello, everybody. Look at that. I even did my hair. So, today we want to talk about inductive reactance. Now, what is inductive reactance? Well, let's first do a little bit of recap of what we did last time. Now, last time we talked about um, multi-wire circuits. And what are multi-wire circuits? Multi-wire circuits are what you see in your house. It is a panel. This was our multi-wire circuit we did 2 days ago. So you got line 1, line 2, and there's a neutral in the middle. These are the circuits that are going to the neutral. That's, basically 120, 120, 240 in between. Pretty normal stuff. But here's the thing. Our problem with this sort of circuit is there's no such thing as a purely resistive circuit. We either have an inductor or a capacitor in that circuit. Now, why is that? Well, what is an inductor? An inductor, simply put, is a coil of wire. So the symbol we use for it is like that. Ooh, you can really not see that, can you? Sometimes I hate this thing. I should probably make it more pronounced. More like this. There's your coil of wire, because that's what it's trying to say. Is it's doing this? It's coiling around something. Because what does a coil of wire do? Well, a coil of wire is it's how a motor works. When you have your coil of wire, you put electricity to it, it creates a magnetic field, and that magnetic field can then make a shunt, not a shunt, but a rotor go in a circle, and that circle is your motor. And what we find in our houses for motors, we have refrigerators, we have, so in fact, I'm going to name the things in our houses that have motors. Fridge, right? Basic. That fridge, don't be a jerk. You know, I'm just going to go in a little bit. It'll stop doing that. We have fridge. We have freezer. You don't act like a dick the whole time. This is what I have to deal with when I'm teaching online. That's why I hate teaching online. Freezer. We've got a... God damn it. This thing's really starting to tick me off. How about I don't autofocus? We have a garage door opener, washer, dryer, dishwasher, fans, like as in exhaust fans, and light fans, so I'll put them both down. Exhaust fans. What other motors do we have? I'm not going to say vibrator, I swear to God. You know, one of those weird... Yeah, you don't want that. So every single one of these has a coil of wire, and that coil of wire, when you put in electricity to it, causes that electromagnetic field, and the electromagnetic field will bring in power back to the main panel. Now, this is how we always do this lecture. This is the only time I can do it the way I want to, because normally I have to draw this. But inductance is like a glass of beer. Now what happens when you pour your beer, and I'm doing a shitty job on purpose to show you this. When you pour your beer, you have the actual beer, and then you have the foam. Now the foam is useless. You can't get drunk off foam, you get drunk off beer. But if you're at your bar and your shitty bartender gives you a glass like this, you're paying for the entire glass. That doesn't change. What's in the glass, that can change. So what's in the glass is we have beer and we have foam. The foam, being the inductive reactance, is the electricity we cannot use. It's there and it's chilling out, but it's unusable. We have to pay for it, but it's unusable. All right. So, what happens... Ooh. What happens then is we get a circuit that looks like this. Here's our AC. What? The other day this was working perfectly. The other day this was like, nah, I'm just gonna be fun. I'm gonna work. It's not gonna be that bad. Today, it's just doing this kind of crap. So here's our 120 volts. It has 60 hertz on it. Hertz being the sine wave. Now let's talk about the sine wave. Sine wave exists because AC current exists. Alternate current exists. Now what happens is we get this thing called Eli. Right? Now Eli means here's voltage, this is amperage, and L is the inductor. When you see L in electrical anything, it means inductor. It means a coil of wire. That's what it's there for. What happens is when you have an inductive circuit, your voltage, so I'm going to make our I this red, actually. Our voltage leads amperage by 90 degrees. So it's out of sync with each other. And when you have those things out of sync with each other, that's when you start having to pay for more electricity than you really should be paying for. Now, this is all well and good in theory. What's going to happen actually out in the real world? What happens is I've got a circuit that has a resistor in it, also has an inductor in it. 120 volts, 60 hertz. Now, normally in this inductor, it is measured in henries. So let's just give it like 4 henries. Resistor is going to be an ohmic value because it's always in ohms. So let's just give it like 23 ohms. We have to convert the henries to ohms. How you do that is with a simple equation here. 2 times pi times F times L. 2 is just a constant number. Pi is pi because this right here is just a circle that's been split. It's just a circle that's been split like that. This is 360 degrees, so we got to use pi. F is the frequency, which we know is 60 hertz, and L is henries. Now, 2 times pi times F. I'm going to show you this real quick because this makes it a lot easier. 2 times pi times 60, which it'll almost always be 60. 3.76.99. I always just round that up and go to 377. So these 3 is just 377 because it's so close. And then that way you can times that by whatever the henries is. Actually, I should put this as 0.4. So now we can go 377 times 0.4. And that gives me 150.8 ohms. So I've converted henries to ohms. That's all I've done. Let's make this 123, just so you can see it a little bit better. So now, what do we do? A lot of people will call these vectors, and they get into a really confusing speak about sine waves and things like that because, you know, everyone's got to be like the smartest person in the room. I don't like to do that. But I will say this, because these are vectors, these are what you can look at these as are triangles. And depending on where this lands on the triangle gives us angles, and it gives us different numbers. So what we got to do is we just got to use one trigonomic equation, and we get all of our answers. Our only no one's here, it's fine. So what we have to do is we have to use, I'll probably just do this whole thing over when Ning gets here. He's the only person that actually gives a shit. We use right triangles because that's what these are. These are right triangles. No matter how you look at it, they're all right triangles. And we use 3 triangles. We use Z, E, and P. Now what the hell is Z, E, and P? E, we already know, that's voltage. E is voltage. Stands for electromagnetic force. P is power. Wattage, it'll be VARs, and it will be voltamps. But what is Z? This is our resistant resistive triangle. Z is total resistance. Total resistance, which means it's the resistance of both the resistor and the inductor. Z is impedance, which is the total resistance of the circuit. Okay? So we're going to find Z for here. Now all we have to do, the bottom side is always going to be the side of the resistor. So here's our resistor with 123 ohms. This side will always be the reactant side. Now, what we can say here, this is R1, resistor 1, and this is X of L, which means the reactance of the inductor. Reactance is that foam that we saw. Reactance is always the straight line side. So R equals 123, X of L equals 150.8. And they're all both in ohms, ohmic values. So now we just have to solve for this side. This side is going to be Z, the total impedance of the circuit. Easy. Pythagorean theorem. What is Pythagorean theorem? It is A squared plus B squared will equal C squared. Then we have to take this out of, we take the square root of that to make it so that it's not a squared number anymore. Or you could put it over here, whatever you like. So this is A, that's B. The long side is always C. So we're going to take 123, we're going to square that, plus 150.8. We're going to square that, boom, equals this large freaking number, and then we're going to take the square root of that number. 194.601 ohms. This is all resistance, so that's our ohmic value. I should make this a little bit bigger, shouldn't I? Let's go like this. Put this up a little bit better. Maybe put this up like here. Put this up right there. Okay. Okay. How's it going, everybody? Ooh, I got hosted. Thanks, Nan. Okay. Are you free now, or am I still going to be doing this over in a little bit? Because I was just going to do this twice, basically. Which is fine. I mean, I do it every day. So let's talk totals, right? Impedance is a total resistance of the circuit. That's my 194.601 ohms. It's the Z value, but it's still... no, that's fine, dude. You just let me know when you're ready. I'll go through this all over again, because it's something that always needs to be done twice anyway. It's a different concept a lot of people don't understand. So we're going to do it a bunch of times. So this 120 is the total voltage of the circuit. And we already know, because we know a little bit of Ohm's law, EIR, right? We know that the E over IR. But we're going to change this a little bit, because we're not using R right now, because we're going to do the totals. It's the same theory, but now it's going to be total voltage over total amperage over total resistance. Total resistance is impedance, so it's actually Z. So we're going to go, coming back down here, we're going to do 120 volts over 194.601 ohms. That's going to give us our total amperage of the circuit. So let's clear this. Let's go 120 divided by 194, oops, 0.601. Our total amperage is 0.616 amps. Now, if we know our rules about series circuits, we know that that means that it's 0.616 amps here and 0.616 amps here, because amperage is constant in a series circuit. This is in series with the other, it's just a straight line going through. So what can we do with that information? We can bring down the 0.616 amps as I total amperage. We can use our next little bit of knowledge and go amperage times resistance. Amperage times resistance will give us our voltage at each thing. So, like I said, the bottom is always the resistor, so we're going to do that one first. We're going to go 0.616 and times it by 123 ohms, and that will give us the voltage at the resistor. Okay? So 0.616 times 123. 75.768 volts. 75.768 volts. That is for the resistor. That's here. Then we're going to do the same thing, but for the reactance side. It's a totally different number. So we're going to go 0.616 times 150.8. And that is for this side right here, like I said before. The bottom side is always the resistor. The straight line going up is always the reactance. So that's 92.892 volts. I always cut it off at 3. Somebody texted me? No. Okay. Now, total voltage is already given to us. It's 120 volts. But if I'm going to use Pythagorean theorem just to double check that these numbers are good. So if I go 75.768, square it, plus, what was it, 92.892? 92.892 squared gives us this ungodly number. Square root it, 119.873. That's pretty close to 120, so we'll just keep the 120. All right, now we go on to our next power wheel, which is the pi wheel, P-I-E. We're going to do voltage times the amperage. Voltage times amps will give us power, and that's our last triangle, is our power triangle. So we're going to times these by 0.616 amps as well. So 0.616 times the resistor gave us voltage, times our amperage is going to give us our power. So first we're going to do the resistor, because that's what we've been doing this whole time. So we're going to go, we're going to go 75.768 times 0.616 amps. Gives us 46.673 watts. Okay, now the resistance is always watts. That's how we always refer to it, because it's all it's all relative. It's all power, but we have to call it different things, so it's not difficult. It's not all the same thing. We have to just distinguish them from each other. Mr. Nin, I'm going to go over this again, so don't you worry. 92.892 voltage of the inductive reactance times 0.616. That gives us 57.221, and we call this bars, as in the volt amps of the reactance. And that goes up on this side. This is our reactant side. 52.221 bars. Now there's two ways to do this next part. We can either do Pythagorean theorem to find the last triangle here, or we can just take 120 and times it by 0.616 amps, because voltage times amperage gives us power. And so we just take the total. We're talking about the totals right now. So let's do that. Let's go 120 times 0.616 gives us 73.92. We call the totals is volt amps. So if you look at anything that says, oh, this is the total volt amps of this thing, they're just talking about the wattage, but what they're really talking about is there's probably a coil of wire in this thing, and with the resistor inside of it, when you get the total power it's going to use, that's the volt amps. So that's what we're talking about, totals. But let's double check. Always double check. So I'm going to do Pythagorean theorem, 52.221 squared plus 46.673 squared equals, take the square root of that, 70.038. I mean, it's pretty close. You know, it's like three off. So we're going to take what we got here. That's that 120 times 0.616. Now, what do we do with this information? I know that my total voltage is still 120. I know that my total impedance or total resistance of the entire circuit is 194.601 ohms. I know that my total amperage is 0.616 amps. And I know that my total power being used is 46.673 watts. Bigger than this is we got to find out the power factor of the circuit. Now, what's power factor? Power factor is the efficiency of the circuit. So what we're going to take is we're going to take our watts. I'll do it over here in the corner. Power factor, PF, equals 46.673 watts over 73.92 volt amps. So power factor is watts over volt amps. So let's do that. $46.673 watts divided by 73.92 volt amps. Now, you're going to get less than 1 for a number, and that's on purpose because our efficiency is a percentage. So, 0.631398, whatever, we're just going to take the two numbers after the decimal, 63% efficient circuit, which is shitty. That's a shit circuit right there. Nobody likes that. It's a pile of garbage. And what we're going to do is we are going to find out the angle theta. Now, what's the angle theta? Our angle theta is this angle right here. And how relative is it to 90 degrees? The smaller the angle, the more efficient the circuit. The larger the angle, the less efficient. So how we do that is we get our calculator out, we hit second cosine, we want to get the 1 over basically of cosine, 50.8, I always just round this up, so 51 degrees is our angle theta, which is second cosine, or cosine -1, right? So 51 degrees. 51 degrees, it's a very shitty circuit. No good. Now, put this all in perspective again. What we're talking about is inductive reactance, and the reactance causes extra power. It's called dirty power. Dirty power. And that dirty power we pay for. So I will do the analogy again because it means I get to drink more beer. Your power is like getting a beer at the bar. And hopefully you're using your Klein bottle opener. What you're going to buy is you're going to buy this glass. You're buying this glass that's going to be full of beer. Right? As I fill the beer, I'm going to get beer and foam. Right? The beer I can drink, the foam I cannot. But if the foam is in the glass, I've got to pay for the glass no matter what. So what I want is I want less foam and more beer. The beer is watts. It's what you're actually using in your circuit. The foam is inductive reactance. You're not using it, but you're paying for it. And you're pissed off because the new bartender, she might be a hot little 21-year-old, but she doesn't know how to pour beer worth shit. You gotta be gentle with your beer. Your beer is like your ladies. So what we want is we want the most beer with the least foam that we want. We want to have foam like this. We don't want the foam that I poured it bad on purpose to show you. This is acceptable. I would pay for this beer. Not a lot of foam, a lot of beer. But nevertheless, I have foam, but I still have to pay for the glass. That glass is the volt amps. So watts, bars, or reactive inductance, and volt amps. Okay, let's do another circuit. So what we want, now I did the last one in series, so this one I'll do in parallel and I'll show you the differences. Because most of the time, well, I'll do it in series again actually. $120 volts. Come on. There you go. All right, 120 volts, 60 hertz, right? This always does this at the beginning when I don't have a lot of stuff on the paper. So I gotta like draw mad quick. Here's a resistor. Here is our inductor. Now again, an inductor is just a coil of wire. It is a motor. It is, so what kind of motors do we have in our house? We've got fridge, dryer, dishwasher, we have freezers. I put a whole list over here. Garage door opener, fans, exhaust fans, vibrators, whatever you might have that's going to make a motor work. Because a motor is just coils of wire that when you put electricity to it causes an electromagnetic field, and that field will spin your armature in the middle. It's pretty simple. So normally what you're going to see is like a motor is still going to have a resistor in it. It's still going to have a coil of wire in it. So you see these in series all the time. They can also be in parallel, and we're going to talk about that next. So let's give this 103 ohms. This is our resistor, R1, right? Then we're going to give X of L. X of L is our reactance of the inductor. So inductive reactance. All right? We're going to give this 0.24 henries. Inductance is measured in henries. We're going to convert the henries to an ohmic value, or X of L, or inductive reactance, right? How do we do that? 2 times pi times F times L. 2 being a constant, we use pi because what's happening in the circuit is what we call Eli. Voltage leads the amperage in an inductive, L being the inductance. Voltage leads the inductance by 90 degrees. Real life example of inductive reactance is every time a motor is happening in your house, like quite literally. So your fridge is making your food cold, you have inductive reactance. Your dryer is tumble drying your clothes, inductive reactance. Because anytime there is an electromagnetic coil that's being activated, creates a magnetic field, and that magnetic field brings back electricity through your circuit, making you pay for electricity you're not using. So quite literally, anytime you're using a motor. Yeah. So every house has it. And there's a way to combat it. There's a way that you can actually use all those motors without having to pay for the foam. I haven't eaten today, and I just down like 3 beers, so cool. All right. So this is what's happening, though. The reason why there's inductive reactance is because this is out of sync. A purely resistive circuit, you're just going to have one line, and it's going to be fine. But this is the amperage, this is the voltage. They become out of sync because of the motor. So, 2 pi FL. What I like to do, because 2 pi F is the frequency, 2 is constant, we use pi because that's what I was actually talking about. In this sine wave, all this is 360 degrees. It's just a circle broken up so we can see the sine wave of it better, right? So we use pi because it is a circle, and pi is a very intricate part of everything that has to do with a circle. So we use pi. Now if I go 2 times pi times the frequency, which is 60, because in our houses it's always 60, I get 376.99. Me being a lazy electrician, I always just put that together and I just round up to the 377, just because it's easier. And it's really not going to make the number any less different. So now I've got 377 times L, which is our inductor measured in henries, 0.24 henries. So we're just going to go 377 times 0.24 henries. That gives us 90.48 ohms. But it's ohms, which is X of L ohms. It's inductive reactance ohms. You got to make sure that you see the distinction, because we're going to use those in different ways. So now we got to put down our power triangles. First triangle is our resistive, or Z. Second is voltage, or E. And third is P for power. Now, Z. Z stands for impedance. And all that impedance means is the total resistance in the circuit, right? Because these are out of sync, we've got to find what's the actual total here. The bottom here, the bottom line will always be the resistive line. The line going up will always be the inductive reactance, or just the reactance line. So this is R1, which is 103 ohms, and this is X of L, which is 90.48. X stands for reactive, and L stands for inductive. So the inductive reactance. Pretty simple. Now that we have this triangle, we just use a little bit of good old Pythagorean theorem, which is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And we've got to take the square root of that c squared to get out of square, obviously. This is a, that's b. The longer side's always c. Probably didn't need to actually say that, but you never know. So 90.48 squared plus 103 squared equals, and then we take the square root of that, it's 137.097 ohms. Z is still an ohmic value, but it's now Z as in the total. So we got 120, which is our total voltage. We now have our Z, which is our total resistance, which is 137.097 ohms. Now, we know our power wheels. Hopefully we know our power wheels. EIR. We change EIR just a little bit, because now it's E total, I total, and then R total, which is now Z. So we take our 120 volts ET divided by our Z will give us our total amperage. So we're going to go 120 volts over 137.097 ohms to give us our total amperage. Do that real quick. 120 divided by 137.097. What do we get? 0.875 amps. I only take 3 numbers because that's too many numbers. So 0.875, that's all I want. Bring it up here for my total, 0.875 amps. Now what do we know about amperage in a series circuit? Even though this is a series circuit because it's a straight line all the way across, up, over, down, amperage acts the same. .875 amps going through the resistor and the inductor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring down the inductor, or sorry, the total amperage. Well, I guess I already have it down here. Right there. And I'm going to use my next power wheel. Our next power wheel being PIE. If I want to find... Oh, wait. No, I'm not doing that yet. Duh. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go I times Z, or I times R, to get my voltage. I want my voltage at each place. Now, luckily, we already know our total voltage. It's right there. So I can put that where the total goes. But I got to figure out my voltage for my resistor and for my inductor. So we're going to go 0.875 amps. We're going to times that by 103 for our resistor, and we're going to times it by 90.48 for the inductive side. Or sorry, the reactive side is what we want to call it. So 0.875 times 103. That's 90.125 volts for the reactor. For the resistor. 0.875 times 90.48 for the reactive voltage, 79.17 volts. Now, if I want to double check this, which I always want to double check it, I want to square that plus 90.125, square that. Oops. I'm supposed to equal that first. Equals. Do the square root. I've got 119.96. That's pretty much 120 volts. So I'll just keep the 120 volts. We're good. Now we're going to use the PIE. So we're going to take these new voltages times it by our total amperage gives us all the power. So we're going to go 0.875 amps times 90.125 volts times 79.17 volts and times 120 volts. It gives us each side. 0.875 times 90.125 gives us 78.859, and that is in watts because that is our resistor. Then we're going to go 0.875 times 79.17. Nice. It's 69.273. That is in VARs because that is the inductive reactance. VARs stands for the volt amps of the reactance. That's why we use it. Then, of course, 0.875 times 120, 105. That is very true. Volt amps. Now, of course, I'm going to double check that because I have OCD a little bit. 104, 104.96, 105. I think we can live with that. 50%, plus or minus 25%, math teacher. So 105 volt amps, that's our total. We've got 78.859 watts, and we have 69.273 VARs. We want to know power factor. How efficient was this circuit? Power factor, watts over volt amps. So we're going to go 78.859 watts over 105 volt amps. Let's see how close this one is. 78.859 divided by 105. 75% efficient. Better than the last one, but it's not great. What's our angle theta? We're going to hit second cosine. 41 degrees, because it's 41.3. I'm going to round down to the 41. Now, this is better. This is definitely better than the last one, but still, like here in New York State, I believe most factories require you to be within, I want to say it's like 93 or above, or maybe it's 94% or above efficient. So this would not be good for New York State if it was your factory. Now, most of our homes don't have the kind of inductance that a factory would have. But there's enough that if you fix your power factor correction, yeah. Well, the only time I do angle theta and cosine is just this, and like this is the hardest math I do as an electrician. Beyond this, it's like, screw it, we're not going to do it. What was I talking about? Yeah, in your house, there is a way to correct the power factor, and the way that you do that is you add in what we're going to talk about next time, boys and girls, which is capacitance. What is a capacitor? Let's talk about that for just a second. Now, the other side was, this was what the inductor did, right? It was Eli. Voltage led the amperage by 90 degrees. What a capacitor does, C being the capacitor, the amperage leads the voltage by 90 degrees. So when you have an inductor and a capacitor in the same circuit, it will bring those two sine waves closer together. And that's how you correct it. We call this theory the the Iceman Theory. Just because it's easy to remember. So Eli, you got your voltage first, then your amperage comes next. Ice, your amperage comes first, and then your voltage comes after. But you put them both in the same circuit, it starts to correct that power factor and makes it so that you pay less. I put a whole house power factor corrector on my old house back in Utah. It's just basically just like a giant capacitor that you put on your entire house, your entire panel. And I think my bill went down by damn near $50. Because if you think about it, well, I was living in southern Utah at the time, which is desert, so air conditioning is a huge, well, you're in Florida, right? So Florida is a enormous amount of motor is going to be used in that air conditioning. So if you get a whole house power factor corrector, I think you can build one, but I think that it might be actually cheaper just to buy one and install it. They're really not that hard to install. I'll look it up though for the next stream that I do about this, because tomorrow I'm streaming and Saturday, but it's just gonna be cooking streams. But then next week, Tuesday, Thursday. Wait, when's Christmas? Well, Thursday's Christmas Eve. I'd rather just do this Christmas Eve anyway. We'll look at the options. I'll look up a bunch of different options because honestly, I don't think you want to build one. It'd be safer if you bought one that was manufactured. But hey, you know what? Maybe I'll find some information on how to build one. Maybe you can build one. I just never tried because I had a job where I was selling whole house capacitors to people. So that was like, I never had to build one. I was just selling them. Electrician, right? That's it. So next Tuesday, we'll talk capacitors. Then Thursday, hopefully, we're going to talk about inductive, capacitive, resistive circuits and how they correct each other. And we're going to have a good time. That will be my Christmas Eve fun time. So tomorrow, I think what I'm going to cook something a little bit easy. I'm thinking about just carne asada fries. How bad could that be, right? And then Saturday, I'm definitely doing tacos. So we're going to make some French fries. We're going to make some steak. We're going to make some guac. And we're just going to just hang out. Because it's my last weekend with the kids for 3 weeks. Because next week they go to Utah. Ugh. Then they come home a week later. But it's then they got to quarantine for 2 weeks. I don't get to see them. So we'll do what we do. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, all of Nin, for being here. Yeah, I got a passion for this stuff. I love this stuff. I love this math. I love being able to solve it. It's my favorite thing in the world. Is there anyone who really needs this many people? Yeah, you know what? I'm definitely going to upload these ones up to YouTube so anybody can see them. Anybody can watch me down a couple beers for fun. Yeah, I'm going to rate Little Nemo just because I really like him. I got my laptop over here. Okay, everybody. Super fun. Yes, that is a very, 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 very good suggestion of putting these on YouTube. But yeah, I'm going to do it because this was a lot of fun. All right, bye, everybody. Have a good rest of your Thursday. Love you all.